Hey, good day. How's it going, eh? This is Brian Nash from How We Got Here Genealogy, and it's unusual for a Saturday afternoon, but I just thought I would drop by and have a chat and answer any questions you might have about uh, genealogy while I'm working away today. Uh, hey, Tracy, you're from Oklahoma. Well, thank you for stopping by. Um, it's your first time watching my channel, let me know in the comments. And uh, yeah, um, and if you have any questions, just drop them in the comments. Usually, when I do my live cast through the weeks, I will have talk about a specific topic. Today, like I said, I'm just sitting around. I'm working on some things, and I thought I would give an opportunity to answer any questions people might have if they're working on their own family tree and they're hitting a brick wall. Uh, they want me to look into something specific for them, I can take a look. So just let me know. Oh, you're a newbie. Great, Tracy. So we can start. If you that are new to this channel, like I said, I do this recording. I do it live, and sometimes my recording, depending, people will wind up being as permanent videos on there. So if you are watching it afterwards, just make sure you do leave a comment, and if you have any questions, I will try to answer them as I do go through my comments, and we'll try to reply to everyone I get. So I don't know if you've watched my videos before. Like I said, my name is Brian Nash. I live in Prince Edward Island, Canada. I'm of Scottish and Irish heritage. My paternal side is Irish. My maternal side is Scottish. My family has been in Canada since the late 1700s, early 1800s. My last ancestor arriving from Scotland in 1905. Very proud of both my Scottish and Irish heritage and my Canadian heritage. But the thing I feel that's important with genealogy is it really helps people get an understanding of history, making it personal. I studied history in university. I studied medieval history, and I've been interested in genealogy. I've been doing genealogy since 1991. Started in my interest a little bit before then, and it's been the last few years where I've really had the time to go and start working a lot more on my family tree and digging a little deeper. So if you have any questions, Tracy, or anybody else watching, like I said, just drop them there in the chat. Now today, I'm just slowly picking away at some stuff. On Wikitree, doing a challenge this weekend called Connect-a-thon, and I've been just picking away at some of the stuff on my one place study that I have on Wikitree, which is about a small coal mining town in Cape Breton called Donkin. So I've been slowly, and I haven't put much effort in it to it this weekend, unfortunately. Okay, Tracy, so you're Scottish, Irish, English, Welsh, and Scandinavian. That's quite a handful, and actually not a very uncommon mix there. Especially the Scottish, it seems that they go hand in hand a lot of times, and the English and Wales as well. Just in British Isles, and any with the Scandinavian, all from that Northern European. Often I'll see in that mix to German, Dutch, and in Canada, we a lot of people with French heritage as well that be thrown in that mix. So, like I said, I'm working on a project. It's a one-place study that I do of a little place called Donkin, which is in in Cape Breton, Nova Scotia. It's where my grandfather was born. A little coal mining community. And I'll just actually have it. I'll just go over here and I'll share it on my screen. Just 1 second here. Oops. I just have to move around a few things there. And let me see what I see there. I'm just going to share this. So this is the little community in Cape Breton, actually, here. Let's make this a little bigger. See if I can do it this way. So this is where the One Tree study is located on Wikitree. It's a really small little community of coal miners, but I started my my one place study in 1921. Is the last Canadian census that's available. They should be out, I think, sometime later this year. That 1931 is expected, or next year. It's every 92 years. I think it's 92 years after they're done that they release in Canada. But it was a really interesting community. It was so I chose 1921 because that is the last point. It's also the point sort of when it was in its heyday and it was becoming a kind of an established community. There have been since the early parts of the 20th century, there were immigrants from around the world that wound up moving there. And I did sort of just a little bit of a summary. The average age at the time in 1921 was 21 and a half years old. The youngest person was less than 1 month. The oldest was 82. You'll see the breakdown of the place of birth, and then the father's place of birth and mother's place of birth. Quite an interesting, like I said, mix of different people from various areas. I really think it's interesting that one person lists their place of birth. There's 5 people list their place of birth as Wisconsin, and 5 people list their father's place of birth as Wisconsin, and 5 people list their mother's place of birth as Wisconsin, as opposed to the United States, which is its own category as well. So with this, like I said, what I'm doing is I have a spreadsheet where I'm working on all these people, or the people that are in the census, and then I'm taking them and I'm adding them. One of the interesting things, I'm just working on this family here, which is actually Brown, not Braun, and let me see if I can actually share this a little differently. I'm going to share this as a whole screen. That way it's let me see. That's screen 2, screen 3. There we go. So I'm going to share this as whole screen. So that way I'm going to add a few things to it. And I'll show you the sort of where I was at with that. When I look at this here, the 1920s, which interesting sets that I actually like 1911 for a lot of the stuff it has. But this is Edna Braun, which is Edna Brown. When I bring up her information, and if I actually magnify it, So here's where I can find exactly about her. So she is on line 35 and she's family number 18. And I can see the person that originally transcribed this, where their issue would be with reading the family names. As you can see, they actually have Mary Brum up here, who is listed as head of household. She's Edna's grandmother. Her son is John. And you can see where somebody might have read that as Bran, Brann. It is just one of those things, just not from the original writer's perspective. I'm sure they knew it was Brown. It's just whoever created the transcription for this. So I was able to actually confirm that if I go to 1921 census and 1911 census, the same Edna, but now listed as Brown. This gives her her month of birth and her year of birth, which is a nice thing about the 1911 census in Canada. Living in the same place, and this time here doesn't give her a line number, but just family number 89. So when I scroll over and I go to family number 89, there I have John Brown, William Brown, Edna Brown, and Annabelle. And those are the same names as I would find in here. I have John, William. There's two Williams. There's Edna. And there's not an Annabelle on this one, but I actually have her at a different location. So I'm assuming she was at a relative's location. Because if I look at the actual information I have, I do have Annabelle Brown. So I actually, like I said, I have a database that I use that sort of gives me some information. And if I go to my complete set on here and I look for Brown, I have Annabelle Brown. She's on page 3 and she's house number 18, family number 18. So I go to my 1911 census and I want to be on page 3. Page 3, and it does look like she's listed here 18 and 18 again. Let me see, and then there we go, Annabelle. I was reading that far away from as Donald. So yeah, Annabelle Brown. So there she is. And again, like I said, when I go to the 1911, I have the same group of people. Again, another William Brown, that's a nephew, and those are all in there, and his mother, Mary, as well. This time she's not listed as head of the household, she's just listed as the mother. So that's one way when it's a good example when you have names that are recorded wrong, where you can go back and you can look. Looking at this quickly, I can see just the thick pen that was used here, whoever transcribed it. But when I go and find the same group of people 10 years earlier, the ones that were living at that point, I do see that they're the same group of people, and they are generally the same dates. The one thing I've noticed with this particular person who took the census in Dauphin in 1921 is that often the census was done, I believe it was, let's see, I have the date here. There's a summary sheet. Let's see. It was done in, I believe, 1921, and I think they were doing it in June at that point. Anyways, if it seems that in the 1921 census, the person was just asking their age and then subtracting it from 1921 to find out their birth date. So if you said you were 10, but you were actually going to be turning 11 later, a month later, he would have you born in 1911 as opposed to 1910. So that's actually a kind of a common thing there. So I don't know if anybody else had any specific questions or any issues they're having, any roadblocks or brick walls. I actually like the term roadblock as opposed to brick walls, just because the way I approach them is, if you're on a road and there's a brick wall in front of you, sometimes you can't go through it. To get to where you want to go, you have to go around it to get that information. And that's the strategy I take when I'm working on brick walls. So as I'm doing this, I'm adding the data fairly quickly for this Connect font. I usually, when I do these, I generally record my information, and I kind of work on it as I'm going, and I'll go back and I'll fill out some more information. A couple things that, since I'm doing this for a specifically for my specifically for the Connectathon, I often am a little quicker, and when I try to put my information in here. So I'm going to add Edna. I just added her code. I just color code them so I can go back and know if I have to do something with them. These color codes are sort of my own making, in a way, just notes for myself. I have a couple common things that I, when I'm working with Wikitree, I have a couple common formats that I'm using here, and basically I'm only looking for the basic sources here. I will go and I will try to find the records and the tenses compare. So I have references to this. If I go and I show you Edna's page here, in my notes, I have 2 notes there, and one from the 1911 census and one from the 1921 census. In the 1921 census, I referenced the 1911 census for the name correction. I add this part here, and then again, this just looks this way because of the one of the tools I have in Wiki Browser. So I'm going to actually turn that off, and actually turn it off right from here. I'm going to manage my extensions, and I'm going to turn it off for now. And then when I refresh this, I should get the normal looking wiki page, I believe. There. So, no, that's actually not that one. It must be this one here. Yeah, the Wikitree B. So I'm going to turn Wikitree B off. And its extension. And I'm going to turn that off. And then when I refresh, it should look a little different. There we go. This is what a normal page would look like. I prefer to use inline sources. I know when I work on stuff on the Scotland project, they don't specifically necessarily like this formatting. Different groups sometimes have different formatting they're used to. If I'm working on something specifically for them, I will try to conform to their formatting where possible. Though sometimes it's easy to forget. I just like this because instead of just having the note following all in one place, it makes it easier to read. I'll go back and I'll probably write up a night's biography. This is the one thing I do add in here, this research note. Just because I'm adding these people, and I do check to see if I can find any other existences of them. I just leave a note there that why I added them. So if anybody ever comes in and goes, why is Grandma Edna in WikiTree? I never entered her, none of her family did. Don't know why. And then from there I'll do that. The one thing I didn't do for Edna yet was look for a birth record for her. So I'm going to go to the Nova Scotia archive. If I bring up a spreadsheet that I have, and excuse me if you're there and I'm kind of turned away, just my camera's on a different screen. So I do see that her birthplace is listed as Nova Scotia. So I'm going to look for her in Nova Scotia. She was born in 1803, and in the 1911 census, I actually know that her birth month as well. It tells me she was born in July, which is really nice. Often the censuses and other places I look at won't have that detail. You're your own brick wall. It does get worse as you go back. I was stuck on my maternal great grandmother for the longest time, and it gets hard. And this is a woman, one of my maternal great grandmothers, my mother's mother, who I met. I met both her parents' mothers. They were alive in my lifetime. I met her and I knew her sister. I didn't know any siblings. My grandmother never really talked much about that side of the family. I knew what her maiden name was. And I knew roughly the year she was born, the year we thought she was born. So I started looking for that. Her maiden name was McInnes, and her first name was Catherine. Well, when I started looking in the areas that I thought she would have been born and lived in at certain points of her life, I started with the 1921 census. I started with her maiden name and her husband's name. Couldn't find them anywhere. When I went back to 1911, when I looked up Catherine McInnes, I found a lot of them. I knew her sister name was Florence. My grandmother's actually named after her, though she never used that name. And I met her sister, my great-grandaunt, Florence. Actually, I was her favorite. She was a spinster, and she died in her late 90s. So she, I knew that, but then even with knowing that piece of information, there was a lot of Catherine McInnes's that had a sister named Florence or Flora, as it was listed. It wasn't until the year before my grandmother died, my grandmother got put into a nursing home, and we were going through some of the items that my grandmother accumulate. My mother didn't really care about family history, and she was throwing out stuff. And I was going through old photo albums, and I found a picture. I want to say I have it here. I don't know if I have it here. I have it somewhere. I have it scanned. Anyways, it's a picture, and it just says grandfather and grandfather and Uncle Uncle Donald, and it was of my great grandmother's. It's because it was in my grandmother's writing, so it was her grandfather, and I knew her other grandfather's name, so I knew it wasn't him, and there was a Donald. So now I had another child that I could compare and start comparing with, which was able to lead me to the right family. But I had that for a long time. It was too hard. Any telltale signs of things that you might see? I haven't run into anything specifically with name changes, dealing because of criminals, spies, etc. I have helped people with when there's name changes. Often they're for different reasons. I was talking with one of a fellow genealogist, and she was working on a project, and it was this gentleman that had multiple names because he had multiple families across Canada. And it was through DNA that actually wound up getting a little settled and finding out who people were, but it was having some issues tracking down. No birth certificates. Several people in my family don't. Was hoping DNA would help sort it out. Okay. Even more confusing after DNA. It's been 25 years circle running, trying to find it. Okay. So you have DNA evidence. You have DNA, but so is it just your DNA? Like, you have relatives that you know on your DNA, and do you guys have matches? Because that's sort of where you can DNA, where it can become helpful, is when you have those cousin matches and you start doing those comparisons. When you have people that are definite on one side of the family, and you know that they also, since I have, for instance, my uncle, he's done a DNA test on ancestry, and so I know if I have people in ancestry that I see that I'm a match for them and my uncle's a match for them, it's my father's brother, I know it's on my father's side where they are. So then it starts to narrow it down. And then I actually have one of my father's mother's sister's children did DNA. So when I have matches that I match with him, I know that it is through my father's mother's side of the family. So it sort of narrows that down a little bit as well. And if you have closer relatives that have done DNA tests, you can sort of start to chart things. So you have no birth certificate, and there's several people in your family that don't have. You're hoping DNA would. Okay, yeah. So with your family there, is there you have brothers and sisters or siblings? I'm assuming that when you're talking about in your family, your direct family. Hello, Andy. How are you doing? So yeah, Tracy, if you have, so they show paternal. Have you done a mitochondria DNA test? Family DNA does that, and that one there will just match. Um, with that one, it's your mother's the female line, so you'll be able to find people on there. Sometimes on the I know Ancestry now has a thing that tells you if it's your father or mother. Again, that's not always accurate. They do their best with the data they have. It's if you have those other relatives you can match it, you know for sure. Do you have? There's a couple ways to sort of the more advanced DNA test, the Y-DNA and the mitochondria one. If you do those, for instance, the Y-DNA is just carried from father to son. So if you had, okay, nope, only child of two, only kids. Okay, so you're the only child of person with, and they're the only children too. So you don't have cousins or anybody to check with. How far back do you know in your family where you have a confirmed relative, like a second cousin, first cousin once removed? Andy, I'm just answering questions here today. So if you have any, drop them in. Right now, I'm just trying to help see if Tracy can get a little piece of idea of where she can start looking. Like what records do you have of your family? Like Tracy, you have no, like you said, no birth certificates or anything. Do you know where your parents got married? When they got married, their parents' names and when they got married. If you have that, you can start probably piecing some records together. Um, Oh yeah, Andy, WikiTree is great. I love WikiTree. This is like I'm saying earlier. I'm working today. This weekend. They're having their Connect-a-thon, and I'm just working, actually doing a little bit on my one place study that I have in between doing things today, and where I'm just trying to get some people added to a tree that are from the small community of Donkin, Nova Scotia. So. Yeah, Tracy, honestly, if you want to drop me a message, if you go to my channel page, you'll see there's an email, and maybe I can I can give you a call and we can sort of sort through some things. I don't mind doing that, and I can see if I can help you with that brick wall. Um, that might be easier than communicating over this way. Um, we can look and see what kind of data you have. But that it does become hard when you're and one of the thing is when we're looking at our, if we don't actually have the physical birth certificates of our parents, often not, they're not old enough that their stuff is available. So Massachusetts, yes, the Boston states. So many of my relatives on both sides of my family wound up in the Boston states, as they called them. So Germany, Andy, now are your family from Nova Scotia? Are they Germans or German heritage? And are they from the South Shore Lunenburg area? Let me see there. Ontario, Michigan. Okay. Okay. Sorry, I thought you were saying up top that you had roots from Nova Scotia, um, Scotland, Massachusetts, Ireland, and Germany. Sorgenfrey. Now, I don't know if that it sounds like it could be Germanic, um, but that could be Dutch. Um, could be um, could be could be Frisian, could be Swedish, um, Norwegian, and one of the other Germanic languages. So Sorgenfrei in Germany, yeah, it means I knew Frey was free, but Sorgen, yeah, free of care. So yeah, it could be. I, I would say it's Germanic, whether it's German. Um, just because even what we define as Germany now, even what they define Germany at the um, turn of the 20th century in the um, late 19th century, everybody that was there was not necessarily German, and not all Germans lived in Germany. Um, so yeah, I mean, it definitely sounds German. Could be. Um, I know my wife's family. Her maiden name is Weigel, and they were of the assumption it was German. That's what their family had been told. They spoke German. Their family, like through the years before, not her father, but or her grandfather, but his parents and grandparents, and they were in a German community in Nova Scotia. But the actually location when I started digging, they were actually from Switzerland. They were Swiss Germans, and to be really technical, they were from the part of Switzerland that's French. Uh, so it it made a then they were German, but not from Germany. Um, Yeah, a lot of Irish have Anglo-Scot roots. I have actually a few different videos on Ulster Scots. I have a good friend that's an author, another Brian McConnell. He's written a book about the Canada's Ulster Scots, and he's done a few books on genealogy in relation to the Orange Lodge. He lives in Digby, Nova Scotia. He's a retired lawyer, and now he's retired last year, but he's from Ontario originally as well. That's very common. In fact, a lot of in the southern United States, in the Appalachians, a lot of the people that are Irish there, they're really this Scots Irish or Ulster Scots is what really kind of the preferred name for them. They're people that came over to Ireland, and then that was just sort of a step for a generation or two, and then wound up moving to Canada, Australia, United States, or wherever. So yeah, Tracy, drop me an email. I definitely, it sounds interesting. I'd love to help you and see what we can find. If we can start to build the pieces together. Again, birth certificates and stuff are not for our parents. In like, for instance, I know Canada and Nova Scotia, you can't get birth certificates till after 100 years after the birth. So that's a kind of a common number in a lot of places. Yeah. I mean, I could check with a couple of my German friends to find out if it would be a name that could be given for a lot of reasons why surnames developed. And it's possible it's even going back far enough, it's not a German name at all, but it was a Germanization of another name as well. Yeah, that would be, and I mean, the big giveaway often is if they were Protestant as opposed to Catholic. Not necessarily, because on my father's side, which is Irish, is all Catholic. There's a couple of Anglicans that are in there, but you don't have. I don't have any Irish Presbyterian, though I do have a couple Ulster Scots in there. At least one that I'm aware of. Yeah, if they were Presbyterian and that goes long back, then they would. Yeah, I would say they were probably Ulster Scots. Again, it's not necessary because there were, and there still are Presbyterian churches in the Republic of Ireland and Southern Ireland, if you so be. Yeah, Tracy, just if you click on my channel name and hit the about, you can find on my about page. There's a link to my email. Just drop me a line and I'll message you and we can sort of take this offline and see what we can do to help you. Do you have any questions there, Andy? I was actually just getting ready to search Edna here around and see if I can find her. Now, when I'm searching for it, according to, like I said, the 1911 census, I have her here, and it gives her birth date as July. No, it says July 1906. Sorry, I thought it was not. I had it wrong. It was 1906. Yes, it's in the in this one here. It gives her birthday as 1907. So again, I'm going to say it was 1906. So I'm going to look here. I usually start the year before. And I'm just going to specifically look for births. I'm living with the grandmother, and they were, he was widowed. So no, there's no Edna here. I'm going to search for marriages. And I'm assuming she got married in Cape Breton. Not necessarily. So she was born in 1907. So I'm looking after 1927. So I'm going to quickly look to see if I find anything. Nothing there. Nothing in Cape Breton County at all. Let's go back and narrow this down and actually just choose Cape Breton County. Edna is not my ancestor. Edna is part of this one place study of Donkin. My ancestors here are the Andersons and the Baxters, as well as I would have various people that would be related over the years that would have been married into the family. For instance, the Borden family is not a blood relative, but they would have been married into the family. So this is the community my grandfather was born in. He was born in 1922. And I started a one place study basing it on the 1921 census. That little mining town there, sort of when it was at its peak, the mine was still going strong at the time, and the community hadn't even been properly named. It was still just being referred to as Dominion Number 6 because it was part of the Dominion coal mining group in Number 6 mine. And it wasn't until about, I think it's I want to say it was 1938 or 1940, between 1938 and 1942, it actually became known as Donkin. And it's just I did it because it's a really interesting microcosm of Cape Breton. As you can see here, this is the place of birth of the people there. If you take out Nova Scotia, you have a lot of variety of people that are from that various places that are in that small community. There was 819 people, and yeah, their place of origin represent a kind of a lot of different places, which I really found interesting because I assumed, like most places in Nova Scotia, they would have you would have a large population, mostly Irish, Scots, English, which they do. But I was surprised at all the other origins, and that's because the mining company did a lot of recruiting of immigrants to come work in the mines. Yeah, Tracy, you get that to me, and I will definitely give you a hand and see what I can do. So yeah, no, I'm just doing this like one place steady. As I was saying, when I do these records, I'm trying to. I need to correct your date. Did I have it right there? Yeah, that's because I hadn't updated the previous one I was copying. So no, when I when I do these, I try to look to see, at least get the base records that I can. I'm using the 1921 census as my main source to start building it. I try to find at least one other source. In this case, this particular family, the people there were also, I found in the 1911 census. So back, and I usually, these here I kind of keep track of, and I'll go back and I'll add biographies, and I try to like leave just a note here as a courtesy thing, if somebody was to come across this, for instance, if this was your grandmother, Andy, that you'd be, well, if you were wondering why is this profile of Edna Brown on my grandmother on the wiki tree, you'd be able to see why I added her. How do you find? Well, that's the one good thing of the 1921 census, particularly. Let me just see here. I'm going to go to sort of my spreadsheet of I have of everybody, and it's going to bring this up here. So I'm going to show you. For instance, let's look for somebody from Nova Scotia, Newfoundland. So this John Milley. So if I go back to my my census documents, and I go back to the 1921 census, and I'm going to look for John Milley in Donkin. So what I'm doing is the back buttons are helpful because I can just go back and modify my search. So this John Milley's one I already did. That's why he was in green, but I'll just show you what you can find there. And the great thing is with the search tool, you can use wild characters. It's really helpful if there's something that's you're not sure how to spell, or you think it might be misspelled. So there we go. This is John Milley. This is the person. So if I actually go and I look at his census record, I believe it's the person. So in the 1921 census, and it's different for each year, but 1921 particularly is really good because it has the year they immigrated and where they immigrated from. So then you can start looking for records. So for instance, if this John was one of my relatives and I came across this, I would know that, well, he was in Canada in 1899, so I'm not going to find records for him before then. And and I know sort of the range because of his birth date where I'd be looking for. So we're looking at 16 years. So chances are I'm not going to find a marriage record. I'm assuming he got married after he came to Canada, to Nova Scotia. I'm going to assume it's Nova Scotia because that's where he's at, but I might be wrong. And he was married here. So when I go and I could actually probably search and see if I could find a marriage record, but I know I'd be searching in Nova Scotia as opposed to Newfoundland. So yeah, that if you're talking about from Newfoundland, one of the, depending on their age, like since John came here when he was 16, I'm assuming his parents also came here. So I could find their records. It might tell me where they were from, their father was from, because that's the one good thing. Like I think I pointed out earlier. I don't know if you're here at this point. So there's John Milley. Sorry. Sorry. There we go. So if I'm looking at John Milley, he's on line 14. So we're looking family 16, line 14. Okay. So he's the head of the household. So it recorded where they were from, and so where they were born, but also the birthplace of their mother and their father. It recorded their religion, which really helpful, and had their occupation. So there was a lot of information in 1921 that was really helpful. When you start digging into it, because it gives you, there's some wage questions. Besides the normal things, they got a little more data on them than you get in some of the other years. For instance, if I look in the 1911 census, it here again, it has different things, but I like the 1911 because it has their month and their year of birth. Because you find it common that I found with the 1921, at least the person who I was taking this census in Donkin, they basically asked the person's age and then just subtracted it from 21. And they would give you the year of birth they assumed. So if you had anybody that was, for instance, if you were listed yourself as 21, they would assume you were born in 1900. But it's quite possible that you were actually born in 1901, in 1899, just that you haven't turned 22 yet because your birthday is a month after the census was taken, after Census Day. But yeah, the 21 census is good for that because it does have where it asks specifically the mother's and the father's place of birth. So I find that really, it's a really helpful one to get back there if you can find people. Because you'll have even people that are in their 60s or 70s that might have immigrated from Newfoundland or the United States or someplace else, that you'll be able to, they will have their place of birth. So it's helpful that way. So I'm just going to work away and on my records here, and I entered Edna's data. So I'm working on page 3 of my data here. So next, I still have in this family, I have Annabelle Brown. Now, and the reason you'll see these here are all listed as part of the same family. It lists Mary Brown as the head of the household. And when I was looking at this, this family here, she was actually listed as Brum, and most of these Browns, except Annabelle, had been listed as Braun, Brann, just the way whoever transcribed it took the information. Again, that was really helpful when I went to search for 1911 census. I searched and I was able to find Edna and her whole family there. So I have John Brown, and I even have his mother down here. She's not at this point. She's not listed as the head of house. She's just listed as his mother. I don't know why in the 1921 they listed as head of house. I'm assuming possibly the census taker just assumed whoever was the oldest relative was the head of house. Because it seems to be the same house. So let's. And I've a lot of interesting thing about these little place. Yeah, the Newfoundland census is when you start digging into them, they're not as easy, and there's a few different ones to find because at this period they weren't a separate colony, so to speak, or a dominion like they had been. They'd gone back to a new form of government where with the administrative council government. So some of their records are a little different. I found some of the cities have some really good records, especially you can find some stuff leading into the war in the 1940s. I was helping somebody out with something not that long ago, and we were trying to find his family had come from England. His grandfather was from Newfoundland, but then had met his mom during the war in 1941. But we were trying to find. He was trying to find the family roots in Newfoundland. They just knew that he was from Newfoundland. So we were trying to dig in, and it can get hard again, especially depending on names. He didn't really have names of parents of the fellow who served in the war, his grandfather. So we were just trying to trace down if we can find any records of him on voters lists, because there was some municipal and elections and stuff where the records actually were available for in the period during the 40s, because he didn't have enough information to necessarily even know what regiment it was to be, and didn't have a regimental number, so you can't go and get your records necessarily. Didn't have a birth certificate or anything like that, so it gets kind of tough sometimes. Yeah, if you look for Newfoundland in the 1921 census, like you'll find, like I said, it's really good. And honestly, the new search that you can do on the Canadian Census site. So if I go back to my search results, you can. And I don't know that questions you. Who is the origin? Let me see. So if I go to modify search, in some of these advanced options, there's different things. So I have the year of immigration. So if you knew that, so where, let's see here. So yeah, you could put, you could actually tell the search and put Newfoundland in there. So right now I have some of my settings. I'm set for, on this one. I'm searching just Nova Scotia, Dominion number 6, which is Donkin. And so if I went here and I actually put birth country, and I put Newfoundland, it should come up with it should come up. Yeah, there's 116 results of people, and I am just searching the 1921. So it's quite, it does let you do that. It doesn't let me, unfortunately, it doesn't have a field there for the birth country of mother, birth country of father, which would be nice. Then you could go and actually go back and try to find even farther. So if they were born in Nova Scotia or wherever, you might be able to find if their parents were born in Newfoundland. Yeah, I was looking for Wisconsin because on the actual records, on the ones that were transcribed that I did before they had some of this new one, like I said, my data, which I compiled and put in spreadsheets, which at the time there's actually pages that were missing. So I found some other ones since. There was one family that put their country of origin is Wisconsin. But yeah, you can search that, so it's really nice. Yeah, there is mixing of Irish and in the Irish of Protestants and Catholics. It's not necessarily uncommon. Even during the revolutionary years in Ireland, there were some mixed marriages. And again, in Ireland, it created a lot of some social issues possibly. When they got into North America, maybe not as much. And I want to say probably in Ireland it was more around family. What's a good Catholic boy marrying a Protestant girl like that, or what's a good Protestant girl marrying a Catholic, and vice versa. More of a family judgment thing. As much it was, which then made it sort of a social, a sort of an issue. So when they came to North America and they didn't have that family conflict, it would probably be or history there, probably very easily, if you were, for instance, living in Donkin and you were Catholic and your wife was Protestant, to just assume one or the other, and people would just assume that's the way it was. But yeah, there would be some mixing, and it's not as likely. And you have mixing within areas, regions, definitely. For marriages, not as common, but it happens. It's my little Irish ancestry mug. I made a says I'd rather be drinking a Guinness. Yeah, and the Anglo surname, like my surname Nash is, a lot of people assume it's an Anglo surname, and it doesn't sound very Irish, and it means by the ash tree, and it was I believe Saxon in origin, but it's actually a more common name percentage wise in Ireland to this day than it is in England. I used to joke that my family was Irish, went to England and they got kicked out of Ireland, went to England, got kicked out of Ireland. England went back to Ireland and got kicked out of Ireland and came to Canada, because there was a little bit of that in the Nash family in my history, but so you'll see that too. It again, people on previous generations, they didn't move around a lot. When they moved, they tended to be larger moves. Like the places in Scotland, you'd be more likely to have a relative that moved from your community to North America than you might have one that just moved to England, or to even the Shire or two over. I think movement of people wasn't as common, wasn't as easy as we have that we have now. Yeah, and definitely people with an Anglo surname, not a reason at all. And it depends on the migration pattern. If you have somebody that one relative, for instance, with the rule of your generations, let me see here. I'm just going to open something else up in 1 second. I'm just looking for something, and I'm going to share it because it's a thing that people tend to forget. Let me see here. So 1795, and that's roughly based on the model of a generation being 25 years, which is kind of a common one, and its pattern I found actually pretty true. So for instance, I was born in 1970, and if I go back to my fifth great grandparents, so the turn of from the 18th to the 19th century, at that point I have 128 grandparents. So of those, 64 of them would be grandfathers. So if I had the one grandfather who had an Anglo name, John English, now that would be passed down to all his sons. So I might have the Anglo name, but again, he's one of 128 grandparents or 64 grandfathers. So I would actually have less than 1% of their of English blood. So if he had moved over to Ireland in he's born in 1795, moved over to Ireland, and he started having sons around 1820, and they eventually came to Canada, and the male line, you could have that male name, very Anglo name, but it would be a low percentage of English so-called blood. And it doesn't take long to get to where, the trace amounts are there. It's really they're minute and they're hard to calculate, because again, it's not exact science. The only one that's exact science is these two numbers here. Your 100% of your DNA is made up of what's in your DNA, and you have 50% each parent. 50% of yours is your mom, 50% of this is your dad's. But when you take, for instance, your dad, well, he's 50% his mom, 50% his dad, but the 50% from you that you get from him is not necessarily a quarter from your grandparents, from each grandparent. You don't take 50% of your dad's DNA evenly necessarily. It's the same as your mother. So these are sort of the maximums really would be when we're looking at there. The maximum would be like 0.75%. So in the 1861 Canada census, and so you're looking at Canada West census of 1861, that's where you're getting their origins from, and they're Anglican. Yeah. So, and being Anglican doesn't mean you're English. It just means you're part of the Anglican Church. There's Anglicans in Scotland who are definitely not Anglican. There's Anglicans in Ireland who are not Irish, or not Anglican English. They're Irish. Definitely. It really breaks down quick when you start going back generation to generation. That's what, less than 200 years ago, roughly. Your fourth great grandparents, you got 1.5% from each one. If it's possible you have more from one of the other ones, but so they were actually born in County Louth. And chances are they didn't live another 60 years to be in the 1921 census. Again, that would still only give you one generation past them, but you can start looking at, when you start hopping over to Ireland, it does have to be more difficult. Church records, knowing that they're Anglican is actually a really positive thing, because you know at least what church records you're going to be looking for. Because if they were in the 1861 Canada census, I'm assuming they were at least, if they were married at that point. They're both over 20, so they're born in 1841 or before. Yeah, your church records are where you're going to be looking for. And so knowing that they're Anglican from Canada Louth, you might be able to, if the diocese had records of all their parishes and were kept centrally, you might be able to find something. And some of it is presumptive. You have to go and look at other information to find out if you can find a birth year. If you, like I said, presupposing they're at least 20 in 1861 if they were living in Canada and married at that point. So you're looking, 1840 if they were a young couple, 18, if they were an older couple, depending when they moved to Canada. You could be looking at the 1800. They could be, or even 1790, or depending on that age that they would have been in 1861. I would probably say, you're looking still at it. If you don't know their age, you can probably judge by their children if you know their children. So yeah, I'm stuck on some of my Irish relatives, and again, a lot of it's common names. I have Patrick Ryans in my family. My father's mother was a Ryan, and I have Patrick Ryans coming up in every generation. There's multiple Patrick Ryans, and my my father's line, the Nashes. There's Patrick Nash, John Nashes. The relative that came from Ireland was John Nash, and I know roughly when he came because it's when he started appearing in records in Nova Scotia. And then he came from Ireland, and his wife came from Ireland, and by their age is that they were, I assume that's where they were married, was in Ireland. But when I start looking for records of John Nash and Mary Welsh or Walsh, we're not sure. I start finding a lot of possibilities, and I'm stuck with I don't even know the county he's from in Ireland. I don't have that much detail. All I have is information from census, information from his son's from his death certificate. It just says his son's death certificate just says that his father was born in Ireland. I think in Nova Scotia, a lot of it is because a lot of the families that were there, if they were there for a long time, they developed roots. The other thing is it was a stopping place. It was often the port where ships landed were somewhere in Nova Scotia, and communities started to develop because of that. But you'd also have people from those communities or from those ship landings that would go further west to Ontario and then beyond. So you have though a lot of the in a lot of the areas, you can trace your roots, and have a pretty established line. Good day, Kevin. Now I need to translate what you're saying, Kevin. If, Okay. You have triangulations on the same chromosomes. Okay. So are you talking about me? You have... Let me see. Okay. You don't know how they're related. Okay. One second here. Making life difficult for myself by looking at the wrong spot. Okay. That's interesting, Kevin. Very interesting. Well, I'm going to actually get ready to wrap this up. I'm actually going a little longer than I thought it was going to be. I do this usually every second Wednesday night. I did this past Wednesday, but I had to cut it short. Yeah, definitely. Andy, like I said, I come back here. I will. I do this every second Wednesday, so not this Wednesday, but next Wednesday after that. I should be. I want to say I should be doing it. That would be I think it's the 4th of May, 5th, the 3rd of May. The 3rd of May, I should be. This would be my next Wednesday night. It's at 7 p.m. Atlantic, 6 p.m. Eastern. I'm going to try again probably another Saturday afternoon, though, just while I'm working on things. If you guys have any questions or comments, definitely leave them. Leave the questions in the comments of this or any other video. I do try to answer all my questions, and really appreciate it if you would subscribe if you're not already. Now, one of the little things that I do in here, though, is I usually get ready when I'm getting ready to leave. I do what's called my last call, because normally my live streams, I call them. It's how we got here, the Genealogy Happy Hour. So I usually announce it with a bell, and then
let's go!
Ladies and gentlemen, at this time I need to announce it's last call at the bar.